All-electric homes aren't just clean and healthy, they save energy and money too. Lucky you, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, or DCSEU, makes home electrification easier and more affordable than ever. Affordable as in district residents can get up to $15,000 off upgrades. Income-qualified folks, no cost. Get rebates for heat pumps that warm and cool efficiently. Induction stoves that boil water faster than Donna Summer can say, well, hot stuff. But funding will not last, so visit dcseu.com/electric and bust a move on energy-efficient electrification for your home.
Sometimes the most meaningful gifts or decorations aren't just regular old family pictures. I'm talking about your treasured high school football jersey, a ticket from your first concert, or a flyer for a loved one's art show. These are your most sentimental possessions, and they can be protected and immortalized by the perfect frame. You know, I just got an old passport of my dad's framed. He died a couple years ago, and I don't know why. This really spoke to me. Luckily, FrameBridge makes it easy and affordable to custom frame just about anything. Just pick the perfect frame for your piece from their curated selection of styles, and their design experts will do the rest. And they'll ship it right to your doorstep for free on orders over $100. Best of all is FrameBridge's happiness guarantee. If you're not 100% happy with your piece for any reason, they'll make it right. Visit framebridge.com or one of 8 local FrameBridge stores at 14th Street, Union Market, Georgetown, Bethesda, Old Town, Clarendon, McLean, or the Mosaic District, and start framing.
Today on CityCast DC, we started the week with a rare treat. Actual summer weather we can enjoy. Humidity that's not too terrible, bearable heat, maybe even a little breeze. But don't get too comfortable. This summer hasn't just been brutally hot, it's also brought extreme storms and flooding. And sorry to say, the worst may still be ahead. Jason Samenow from the Capital Weather Gang, the go-to source for all things DC weather, is here to break down tips for surviving in these hot summer months, what's coming, and why DC's summer heat is far from over. Today's Wednesday, July 23rd. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Jason, thank you so much for being here. I kind of feel like I'm speaking to a local weather celebrity. Do you get this a lot?
Once in a great while. You know, we have our fans. We've been, doing weather in DC now for about 20 years. So we have a following and people that enjoy our coverage. So it's always gratifying.
I am very much one of those people in the following. When you were younger, were you interested in weather? Like, what got you into this kind of work?
So I've been interested in weather since I was 10, actually. We had back-to-back snowstorms, which caused school to be closed for 7 days in a row. And the impact that snow had on the region just fascinated me at the time. And so I just started to follow the weather really closely after that. And my interest in snowstorms evolved into all things weather, including hurricanes, thunderstorms. And then when I went to college, I really got interested in climate change and the effects climate change is having on our weather. So it's been a good ride and sort of a passion or a hobby that's turned into a career.
Do you have a favorite kind of weather event in DC to cover?
For sure. I mean, I think for me, just because, it all began with snow, I love to forecast and write about snowstorms. So the winter months are my favorite from that perspective. Snowstorms are a lot of work in terms of covering them just because there's so much interest. It's kind of like feeding the beast. People want updates on our snow predictions all the time at all hours. And then once the snowstorm's underway, we live blog it and it's a lot of fun. People engage a lot with the snow events. I think snow probably has a greater impact on the area than any other type of weather event just because we're so dependent on our transportation system and snow obviously affects that and whether we can go to school or go to work and so forth. So people are paying a lot of attention when snow's in the forecast.
I am dreaming of icy, cold, snowy weather right now. It would be such a blessing from this heat.
I know. I think we're all looking forward to those crisp fall days and then the transition to winter for sure when we're talking about heat indexes over 100 degrees.
I know that you all at Capital Weather Gang predicted a hot and wet July based on forecasts. I have my opinion about how accurate that's been as somebody who's just been out and about in DC weather lately, but how accurate has that been?
I think we definitely got the humidity right. So far, it's been the second most humid summer on record here in DC. And the heat actually has been only a little bit above normal. We're running about 1 degree above where we typically are at this time of year. So most days have been right around 90, 91 degrees, which is pretty typical. The nights have been unusually warm just because it's been so humid. And when you have all that moisture in the air, it's hard for it to cool down at night. But yeah, our forecast right now is looking pretty good for July.
So it actually, perhaps my anecdotal experience is not actually reflecting what's actually going on in the data. In my mind, we have never had a hotter July, but you're saying actually it's not, it's like kind of par for the course for DC for this time of year.
Yeah, for sure. Typically to see highs right around 90 degrees, which is where we've been each day, is pretty normal. I mean, DC is known for its heat and humidity, and so we haven't seen anything extraordinary. Last July was actually quite a bit hotter. We had several days break 100 degrees. This day, our hottest July day so far is just 95. So we can certainly be hotter than 95 in July. We saw that last year, but so far we've held the heat in check somewhat, even as the humidity has soared.
As you mentioned, DC is a place that is known for its humidity. It feels, when you go outside, it feels like you're inside of someone's mouth. I saw a meme that was like, DC feels like soup and we're the ingredients. What is the difference between it being hot and it being humid?
Yeah, sure. So the humidity just refers to the amount of moisture in the air. So it can be hot and dry, and it actually doesn't feel that bad because your sweat can evaporate quickly. That cools you off. But when you have all that moisture in the air and you sweat, you don't cool off as effectively. That's why if you go to a place like Phoenix, Arizona, or Las Vegas in the summer, it's really, really hot, but it's also super dry, so it doesn't feel as hot as it actually is. Whereas here, it might not be that hot, but it feels oppressive just because it's so humid and there's so much moisture in the air. It's like walking outside into a steam bath at times.
This might be a stupid question, but how do you measure humidity?
There are a couple of different ways. The way that meteorologists really like to measure humidity is using something called the dew point, which is the temperature the air would need to cool to be totally saturated. And basically a rule of thumb is the following. Anytime the dew point's above 70 degrees, that's very uncomfortable, borderline oppressive. If you get above 75, it's just miserable. I'd say it's gross outside when the dew point's above 75. And so the dew point is what we like to use because it's an absolute measure of how much moisture is in the air. And on the flip side, if the dew points are in the 50s in the summer, that's very comfortable, and that means the air is pretty dry. In fact, in the desert Southwest, Phoenix, Las Vegas, dew points there are often in like the 30s during the summer. So that just shows you how dry the air is out there.
All right, suffice it to say, we are in some morally ambiguous times right now, rife with hot-button issues. So it makes sense that we'd need help sorting through sticky situations and moral dilemmas. Enter philosopher and New York Times ethics columnist Kwame Anthony Appiah. He'll be at the Library of Congress on July 24th for a live event, Ask the Ethicist, hosted by the library's John W. Kluge Center. Explore real-world moral dilemmas and cast your vote on what you would do. Then hear how one of today's most influential public philosophers thinks through the same questions. Thoughtful, engaging, and full of surprising moments, this interactive program allows you to reflect on everyday ethical questions in a way that's personal, relevant, and fun. That's Ask the Ethicist this Thursday at the Library of Congress. Get free tickets at loc.gov/live.
When someone else's negligence changes your life forever, figuring out what to do next can feel overwhelming. You need lawyers who won't back down. NACE Law Group has been winning serious injury and wrongful death cases in D.C. for decades. They don't just settle, they fight for real justice. And they're not afraid to take cases to court to get it. Because when you're facing medical bills, lost wages, and unimaginable pain, good enough isn't good enough. You might remember them as Paulson and Nace. It's the same trusted lawyers, just a new name. If you need someone in your corner, reach out to NACE Law Group for a free, no-obligation consultation. Visit WashingtonDCLawyers.com or call 202-463-1999. That's 202-463-1999. Speaking of moisture, we have to talk about these intense storms that we've had in DC lately. It seems to me the storms are stronger than usual. Are we actually getting more rain, having more stormy weather than usual for this time of year?
Yeah, it's been unusually stormy for sure. In fact, the National Weather Service has issued 16 flood watches for DC so far this year, which is a record over a 3-month period. We've never seen so many. Because the year has been so humid, you put all that moisture into the atmosphere and you make that moisture available to storms, you have the potential for the storms just to unload tremendous amounts of rain. And we've seen that happen on numerous occasions. Now, in terms of like the official rainfall at National Airport, which is where official records for DC are kept, rainfall is only slightly above normal, believe it or not. But, what tends to happen is thunderstorms are hit or miss, and some areas get hit really hard, other areas get sometimes left out. And so just because, the official weather station for DC has only seen slightly above normal rain, there are other places in the area which have seen a ton. For example, the flash flood event, which just happened over the weekend in Silver Spring, where they had like 5.5 inches of rain in just 1 to 2 hours, which is just a phenomenal amount of rain in that amount of time, and it caused serious flooding. So, and we've had several of those events around the region this year in recent weeks because of all that moisture in the atmosphere.
I was just going to say that storm was unusual in that where I live in Columbia Heights, it was quite stormy. And I was like, oh, it's really raining. Then I opened up TikTok and I saw all of these videos from like Sligo Creek where people were like having to abandon their cars in pretty deep water. And it just really reminded me that, the way that I'm experiencing this storm in the district might be very different just a few miles away.
Yeah, it's amazing. The storms can have a very sharp cutoff such that your neighborhood could be dry and then you just drive literally a mile away and you get into a deluge. And that was the case, exactly. The difference between Columbia Heights and Tacoma Park was massive with that flood event over the weekend. And Sligo Creek, the water level rose 10 feet in just 30 minutes, which is phenomenal. And they had their highest stream level there in over 2 decades. So that was just a very localized event, but extreme. And I say localized, but it did affect a large part of the area. Great Falls, Virginia also had about 5 to 5.5 inches of rain. Even parts of northern Prince George's County around College Park had flooding, far northern parts of DC. So it was basically a stripe from Great Falls to Greenbelt, Maryland, where the heaviest rain concentrated. And there were dozens of high water rescues because of people stranded in vehicles from that exceptional amount of rain in a short time.
Do you have any sense of what you should do in these situations? There's one video in particular that I watched where someone is sort of pulled out of an open window in the back seat. And I remember thinking, I don't know, I hope I never find myself in this situation to find out. But I was like, I don't even know what one should do if they find themselves in a flash flood.
Well, the first thing you should do is try to avoid getting into a flash flood to begin with. And there's a saying that we like to say in the weather community, which is turn around, don't drown. So, basically, if you're driving and you come across high water, there's a temptation to try to want to drive through it. But the problem with that is that the water level is really difficult to judge, and it doesn't take much water to sweep your car away. So it's deceptive. A lot of people think they can drive through it, but they can't. So the first thing you should do is not try to drive across a flooded road. You should turn around and find an alternative way of getting to wherever you're going, or also just try not to drive in heavy thunderstorms, period. Like usually thunderstorms move through in 30, 40 minutes. Even with the weekend event, this thunderstorm was a little bit longer lasting because it stalled, but you could, if you just waited out for an hour or two, you can avoid some of those problems.
Another thing that happened recently was this tornado watch and also recent tornado warnings. How do they determine whether to send out a tornado warning? And have there actually been more of those recently?
Yeah, so there's a difference, which is important to understand, between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. And so a watch means that their ingredients are placed for possible tornadoes to form. It means to stay alert, have a way to receive warnings if a warning is issued. So watch means pay attention, okay? It's kind of like if you're going to make a cupcake, you have the ingredients on the table. Now, the warning is when the cupcake is made, okay? That's when it's happening, okay? So when a tornado warning is issued, that means a tornado has either been detected because of rotation on radar or seen by someone, and that means you need to seek shelter immediately. And with a tornado warning, you need need to seek shelter in the lowest level of a strong building, preferably an interior room away from windows. So that's what you need to do. And yeah, we have had some tornado warnings this year in the region. I wouldn't say more than normal. In fact, we've had a couple of events, but actually last summer we had a more serious tornado event that when we had multiple tornadoes track through Montgomery County. We haven't seen anything like this year, but we have seen a few small tornadoes form in the region.
Jason, I appreciate that you correctly clocked that I am someone who would work with a cupcake-based metaphor.
Well, yeah, no, I've heard that one and I like it, so I figured I may as well use it. But yeah, no, it's basically, you think about a watch, it's the ingredients are in place, and the warning means it's happening, it's real. So that's a good way of thinking about the difference.
So with all of this extreme weather, is this a permanent shift? Do you feel this is going to be the new normal for DC for this time of year?
I think in terms of the heat and humidity, we're definitely seeing a trend towards more of both of those measures. So because of climate change, human-caused climate change, the fact that we're adding heat-trapping gases into the atmosphere because of our activities, driving our cars, powering our homes, and so forth, we have seen temperatures on the rise in DC. Just one statistic. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, we averaged about 20 to 25 days per year, which reached 90 degrees or more in DC. We're now up over 40. So we see about 2 weeks more of 90-degree weather now than we did about 100 to 150 years ago. So that just means we need to be more prepared for the heat and ready for it. At the same time, we've also seen the humidity increasing because when you warm the atmosphere up, you intensify evaporation. That means more of the water which is on the ground enters the air. That means it's more humid. And again, it's no surprise then that we're having our second most humid summer on record because our climate's warmed up. And so we're going to have more summers that are like this, that are humid and oppressive and also hot. It doesn't mean every summer is going to be hotter and more humid than the next. There's variability. The weather tends to do its thing. So we could still have a cooler, more pleasant summer from time to time, but the chance of having those cooler, more pleasant summers is lower than it used to be.
This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique that quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Just one of the 12 languages you can learn with it, including Dutch, French, Italian, which is going to be next for me, Turkish, and Russian. I love the interactive dialogues that Babbel has, which allow me to practice what I've learned right away, and also the speech recognition function, which makes sure I'm getting the pronunciation just right, which honestly, usually I'm not. Also, I love that Babbel's lessons always cover actual things that I talk about in the real world, like food, talking to people I've just met, and also food. Staying motivated to learn a new language has never been easier thanks to real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations in only 10 to 15 minutes a day on Babbel's mobile app or website. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
In terms of practicality, what things can folks do when it's this hot and this wet out to just stay safe, stay in a good place?
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially for the people who are vulnerable to excessive heat, those are the people that really want to pay attention to the forecast and take action. And, we're thinking about people like outdoor workers, they want to make sure they take breaks and that they don't overexert themselves on hot and humid day, that they stay hydrated, and that their employers make sure that they're getting the breaks they need so they're not succumbing to heat exhaustion or worse. We also want to pay a lot of attention to the more vulnerable groups in our community, the people who don't have access to air conditioning, the unhoused, the homeless, and also older adults, people who live alone, who maybe have mobility or cognitive impairments. They may need more help. They may need people to check in on them on hot days just to make sure they're staying cool or have ways to stay cool. And again, for people who don't have access to air conditioning, whether it's the unhoused or another group, this local government, cities can do things like open up cooling centers so that those people can find a way to stay cool on these particularly hot days. And I think another audience that should pay attention are athletes, especially with summer sports for high school athletes. And on those hot days, the coaches need to make sure that their students or athletes are staying hydrated and taking sufficient breaks. Again, the heat and humidity isn't going away. We have to find ways to deal with it.
Are there any cooling centers available in DC?
Yeah, DC does have a network of cooling centers, and they do open those up when temperatures rise above a certain threshold. So, yeah, the DC has been pretty proactive in taking steps to help people out.
I've never been to a cooling center in DC, but when I lived in New York, our air conditioning units, there was like an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease circulated in the air conditioning, and so we couldn't use them. And so spent quite a few times at a cooling center during a very hot summer. I know them very well. It's a great resource that cities offer.
Yeah, and you don't have to go to a formal cooling center either. I mean, you can go to a mall, you can, if you have the means, you can, go see a movie or do something like that. Just find common sense ways to stay cool.
Given the oppressive heat, how can folks be managing their cooling bills and electric bills and things like that?
Sure. So one of the things that can happen is that when we have a big heat wave, it can put a lot of stress on the power grid. And I have seen situations where, when we've had long duration heat waves that result in brownouts and blackouts, and that makes the heat waves a lot more dangerous because, as I mentioned before, the number one way to stay safe during a heat wave is to be in an air-conditioned environment. But if you lose power, you won't have air conditioning. So I think during heat waves in particular, it's important to try to conserve energy, turn off lights when you're in rooms and not using them. And also keep your thermostat up if you can, especially when you're sleeping or when you're not in the house. And that will reduce a little bit of the stress on the power grid and hopefully help those power companies keep our electricity on when we need it the most.
One of the impacts of all the storms we've seen recently are things like downed power lines. If folks are out and about and they experience this, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that results from some of the more intense thunderstorms is that they unleash these damaging wind gusts, which can bring down power lines and knock out power. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. For starters, we have a lot of trees in the area, in the DC area. And when there are these intense storms which knock down trees, that can be a dangerous situation. That's why we say when thunder roars, go indoors. So, I mean, ideally, you don't want to park your car under a tree when there's a potential for heavy thunderstorms. And you also just want to be inside a strong building. So that's for starters. In terms of taking action, other actions, I think those are the primary things to keep in mind when we have heavy thunderstorms is you want to be inside. And if you can move your car away from trees so that they're not as vulnerable to tree falls, that's a smart move. And I think you also have to be aware of the fact that, when you do have power outages that result from thunderstorms, if it's hot out like the next day and it's a long duration power outage, that can cause impacts as well, because then again, you don't have a way to stay cool if you lose your power after a storm. And that has happened. Like in 2012, there was a heavy thunderstorm event. It was called the derecho that came through and took out power to more than 1 million people. And then we had a huge heat wave after that. So that wasn't a good situation because then you had a large number of people without power during a long duration heat wave. So that's a situation we want to try to avoid, but sometimes there's only so much you can do.
So July has already been, in my opinion, pretty miserable. What do we have on deck for August? Tell me things are going to be a little bit better.
Yeah, we haven't done our August outlook yet, but we would have to lean towards somewhat above normal temperatures and humidity yet again. Stay tuned. We'll be putting that out. If you follow us on any of our social media platforms, or you can just go to cwg.live and you see our forecast updates each day. But yeah, we'll put out our formal August outlook in about a week or so. But yeah, we're leaning hot and more humid than typical.
Bummer to hear, but definitely folks listening, Capital Weather Gang, I feel, is the place to go for all your weather questions and needs. This is kind of a weird question. When we had all the storms happening, I was feeling very under the weather, and someone said, oh, it must be the weather and the humidity and all of that. Is that true? Can the extreme weather impact allergies, sinuses, headaches, migraines, that kind of thing?
For sure. I mean, obviously, during the spring when we have the trees, bursting out with pollen, that can certainly affect people with seasonal allergies. So basically, any time from late February through early May, the trees come out and they unleash a ton of pollen. So that is a time when a lot of people are miserable. And then in terms of like aches and pains, headaches, yeah, that can occur when the pressures are lower. Some people can feel it in their bones when we have drops in pressure, when the weather's more stormy. And so, yeah, there's a whole literature on that. And yeah, certain people who, especially, if you have arthritis or ailments like that, you can feel it a little bit more when the weather is cool, when it's damp, when the pressures are low. It can definitely affect your health.
So it sounds like August, we might not be getting a break from this kind of weather. So I'm wondering, the next couple of weeks in July through the end of the month, what are the forecasts predicting?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of variability in the weather, a lot of kind of ups and downs over the next couple weeks. During the early week, there will be a reprieve from the heat and humidity. That will last through about midweek. And then unfortunately, the bad news is that we could see some of our most hot and humid weather of the summer so far coming on Friday and Saturday. It could linger into Sunday too. We could have temperatures closing in on the century marker around 100 degrees both those days, and heat indexes, which are a measure of how hot it feels, up around 105 on Friday and Saturday. So that's going to be pretty miserable. And as I mentioned before, we haven't seen the temperature above 95 so far this July, but we'll probably surpass that with this heat wave coming up late in the week. So those are the days to pay attention to. And then over the weekend, more showers and storms, and some of those could be heavy yet again. So we may be talking about flooding and maybe severe winds as well with some of the storms coming up over the weekend. So beyond that, temperatures may cool off a little bit yet again. So that's why I said it's going to be up and down a bit. But yeah, we've got to brace for a pretty intense heat wave later in the week.
Jason, I know you probably have all of your fancy special weather equipment to do your job professionally, but I know a lot of people who have a lot of ad hoc, janky weather prediction mechanisms in their personal lives. Do you do any personal weather predicting in your home that maybe isn't as professional as the gear you've got as part of the Capital Weather Gang?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to kind of take weather observations at your house, there are a lot of home weather stations out there, and you can go online and research them. I have something on my roof called a Tempest weather station. It's, I think it's like a couple $100. It will tell you how much rain fell, will measure the wind speed, the wind direction, and will, of course, give you temperature and sort of basic weather variables like that. There's another company called Davis Weather Instruments, which makes good stations. And then, you can obviously do things less expensively. You can just get a basic thermometer or rain gauge, which is basically just a small tube with a ruler on it, which tells you how much rain falls. So yeah, you can do sort of low-cost budget ways of keeping up with the weather as well. And in terms of forecasting, I mean, I think you need to just find a trusted source. I think there are a lot of good apps out there for following weather. Obviously, we hope if you're in DC, you follow Capital Weather Gang, and you can.
Why would you not?
Yeah. So there's an easy way to find us anytime, which is just type in cwg.live in any web browser on your phone or on your desktop. So we've got that short, easy URL. So we like people to visit us that way. But yeah, and of course, we're on WAMU during the morning and afternoon drives with our forecast. So there are a lot of good sources of weather information in the area. The TV stations do a great job. Channel 4, 7, 9, 5, they all do well. The weather community in DC is pretty tight knit. So we all know each other, and we've got a good group of meteorologists here. And the National Weather Service, of course, like we all rely on them. They're kind of the backbone of all our forecasting efforts because they produce the numerical models that we use to predict the weather, and they produce their own forecasts, which we, of course, review before making our own.
Well, Jason, thanks so much for keeping DC informed.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Enjoyed the conversation.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with the weather nerd in your life. You could tell a friend, rate the show, and leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast DC neighbor. Just visit membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.